Welcome back to Breakfast Television. My name is Sid Sero. It can be said that each generation stands upon the shoulders of those who have gone before. But what happens when the shoulders of one generation have been affected by devastating experiences? How much does this matter to the success of future generations? And are there ways to mitigate the harm? Joining us this morning to discuss this important topic are Giima Stacey Laforme, Chief of the Mississaugas Credit First Nation, and Juno Award winner and former Grand Chief of Mushkegowuk Council, Lawrence Martin. To both of you, thank you very much. Giima, you're in studio. I'm going to go to you first. A quick story, though. You were in Mississauga yesterday, and you literally, just before we came up, you told me about a very important event. Walk us through it, please.
Yeah, so I was at the Paramount Food Arena, which used to have a different name.
It's had many names in Mississauga, yeah, definitely.
And there were thousands of youth brought into the arena, and they were playing it into the classrooms. And it felt so good to be there with all those young people, because they're our hope for the future, you know, and they so wanted to be there, and they want to do the right thing. And sometimes I think we should just get out of their way and let them do the right thing. But we need to help guide them.
So that gave you hope yesterday?
Oh, yes.
What you saw gave you hope?
Oh, yes.
In what way?
Oh, like I said, the youth are our future. And the idea that this generation coming up is learning things that your generation and our generation never learned.
True.
They are learning it early on, and that can make a difference.
Fascinating. Lawrence, over to you. Intergenerational trauma. How would you define that?
Well, I mean, the trauma we've been facing as Indigenous people here in Canada has been going on for so many years, so many generations. And of course, the trauma will continue to be there. Even after, like when the residential school started, for instance, in the 1800s, and they were still around in the late 1900s. So obviously there's going to be trauma from that experience, and it just continues to carry on. And in my work that I've done as Grand Chief or as somebody that does the medicines with the sweat lodges and ceremonies and so forth, I see those traumas being carried on, and they're being talked about in these settings. And it's really difficult to try and come up with solutions on how to deal with them, and how do you move forward as an individual or as a family member. So it's like or especially as a community. So it's definitely there because it's been going on for so many years, so many generations. I guess obviously it's going to carry on in that way.
Lawrence, one more question to you. When people from non-Indigenous communities approach you, first off, how many have come up to you in the last 12 to 18 months and genuinely said to you, what do I need to know? I feel like I'm not in the loop I should be in here in terms of the history of this atrocity. What's the one common question you are being asked?
I think because we have been exposed to a lot of media in the last year and a half, especially with the findings of all these different bodies, children's bodies, that has brought that whole question and discussion to the forefront once again. And people wanted to know what did happen in the residential schools, why were so many children taken away, and so forth. So I think that a lot of people have come forth, and because of my work that I do, I've also been involved as a mayor of 2 different municipalities in Northern Ontario. So it allows me to talk to a lot of folks that are not Indigenous to this country. And the interest is there. And even in my ceremonies, I bring non-Native people into my sweat lodge ceremonies so that they can also learn the spirituality of our people and learn from that perspective. So I think every opportunity that I have been given, I'm always sharing that in speaking and talking to groups, in workshops, or even in my music that I do. I make sure that I talk about these types of situations we have been in, and always looking for allies, looking for people to help us, overcome what we have gone through, so that we can experience the solution finding trek that we need to be on. So it's always looking for those allies, as I call them.
Well said, Lawrence. Let's come back in studio here. Giima, allies. How many are you encountering?
Well, we're finding a lot of people, but first, we got to educate ourselves. We've got to make friends, and then we become allies. And then we learn about the issues that the Indigenous people are facing, and then we become involved.
There are steps to it.
Yes.
You're right.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We build our relationships through understanding, friendships, and reciprocity. And I think that's good to keep in mind for everybody.
Giima, I want to, if you'll allow me, I want to read an excerpt from a poem you wrote last year about reconciliation. Here's a bit of it. And when I'm asked, what does reconciliation mean to me, I will say, I want their lives back. I want them to live, to soar. I want to hear their laughter, see their smiles. Give me that, and I'll grant you reconciliation. Those words, if I'm just reading them and I don't have the pleasure of speaking to you one-on-one, I come away with that thinking reconciliation's very hard. Reconciliation's darn near impossible. Truth is what we're all getting out there now, finally. Can we attain true reconciliation?
See, when I wrote that poem, I wrote it the day of or the next day of uncovering the children. And I was angry, I was sad, I was hopeful, all those emotions at one time. I think we can get to reconciliation, but that poem was not to say we can't. It was to say, for so long, we've been just scratching the surface, and now you understand the depth and the breadth of the issues we face and the hard work ahead of us.
One last question to both of you. Lawrence, we'll go back to you. We appreciate you joining us today. What's the most important next step here, Lawrence?
To me, it's a continuation of, say, the government itself following the Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommendations. There's still a huge list of recommendations there that have not been achieved. So, and those points are very important. They have to be followed. And then I think we'll see some impacts at the community level, on the street level. I just got back from a conference also talking about how First Nations, becoming proponents in business, in industry, and how government needs to open the doors to allow First Nations to participate in those kinds of endeavors. So I think the government is key to making sure that the opportunities are there, and those impediments that have been there for over all these generations are taken away, and that there's actually procurement processes in place that allow us as First Nations and business people to participate in the supply chain to what Canada purchases from everybody else. So I think those first steps to me, or next steps, is the continuation and also to expand what the government can do. In terms of the Canadian public itself, I mean, yes, I agree with you. It's a tough question on what reconciliation is and what it can be. I mean, even just the word reconciliation, we're assuming that we had a good relationship at some point, but did we? When the settlers came in, it was a very harsh time for them and for us especially, and how the treaties came to be and how they were signed and how these promises were made. And yet people were so marginalized, and these desolate reservations that didn't really allow us access to the public, access to the education system, good health systems, good job opportunities. And, after so many generations and centuries for this matter, we're now finally just starting to see our people becoming doctors and lawyers and professionals, and we see our business people getting involved slowly, but that needs to be expanded so that we can actually become part of a very strong Canadian government society.
Hear, hear. Giima, final word to you. What's the next important step here?
A major step is, yes, we're talking about Indigenous reconciliation, but we can't lose sight of the fact that there are so many in this country who suffer from marginalization, who suffer from systems that don't know them, and they are allies, and we can't separate ourselves to the point where they feel neglected. So it's important that people remember that we're all in this together.
Giima, Lawrence, to both of you, today would not be the same round here without you and your input. We appreciate you and thank you very much.
This
is a triggering day for a lot of people. A lot of people. We've shown some of the contact numbers and the websites and whatnot. Again, if you need to talk to anybody for any reason, there are the numbers. More BT after this.